The most interesting thing about this ship is probably the camo you see on it right now. It's a special camo that makes it look like an ancient Greek warship. And that's because this ship is Greek. It's the Tier 8 Premium Pan European Destroyer Velos, which is the reward for the ongoing August 2024 campaign. Unfortunately, I think it's kind of a mediocre vessel. If I had to use one word to describe it, the word would probably be vanilla. But that doesn't even quite cover it, I suppose, because vanilla can be a very rich and interesting flavor. This is perhaps a little bit more like plain Greek yogurt or something. What I want to do is go down the stats as I usually do and basically tell you why I think this ship is so vanilla or so plain Greek yogurt. I don't really recommend pursuing this, but you might want to buy the Admiralty backing just to get the drachmas that drop throughout the entirety of the campaign. That way, you could perhaps get a more interesting ship from the store, like the Georgia, which we covered again yesterday, and I'll continue to cover some of these other ships that you can get as time goes on, including the Borodino, Belfast 43, etc. All of those are probably more interesting choices than the Velos is. As for the commander, though, some say he only knows two facts about ducks, and both of them are wrong. He is, of course, the Stig. This is the torpedo focus commander for the Pan European destroyers. I think you could go either way, though, with this particular vessel. You could use Stig or you could use Swirsky. Swirsky is going to buff the gun power a little bit, and the Stig is going to buff the torpedo power, including the reload. We actually have some pretty absurd numbers when we get to the torpedo reload. This match, also, by the way, is one that I picked with a little bit of hesitation because you see here, we're inside of the Bravo cap. We managed to succeed in taking it, and we're going to be playing a cat and mouse game with this radar Minotaur for quite a while. Both he and his division mate in the Venezia have now invaded the Bravo cap to try to undo our hard work. And probably the first 7 minutes of this game is going to involve me just playing around this cap, trying to retake it, trying to spot these guys, etc. Just doing basic destroyer work without actually dealing too much damage until 7 minutes have passed, when we start dealing damage, and then we continue to do it throughout the rest of the match. I think this particular game is a good example of what to expect from this ship. A very plain vanilla destroyer playstyle where if you stick to the basics, certainly you can have success. I'm not saying that this ship is necessarily bad, it's just not all that interesting and it's pretty plain. So, for the stats, let's begin there. We've got 20,140 hit points, but that does include William Sims as one of the inspirations. I think the base HP is a little bit lower than that. And that's fine, I suppose, for a Tier 8 destroyer. As for the guns, well, this is essentially a Fletcher-class destroyer, but one of the 5 Fletcher guns has been removed, leaving us with a total of 4 127mm guns. Basically American destroyer guns, so they have very floaty shell arcs. Reload time is 2.8 seconds with the Stig build. You can get it lower with Swirsky. I think I had it around 2.1 seconds maybe, and that, to be fair, is pretty fast when you have Swirsky at the helm. The range on the guns with Stig is 10.9 kilometers. With Swirsky, I did have it up to 12, which is perhaps a little bit better, but again, the shells are super floaty, like American destroyer shells usually are, and so trying to hit things at maximum range can be a little bit challenging. Of course, the turret traverse time is very quick at 5.3 seconds, and the shell damage characteristics are pretty much what you would expect from American 127mm guns. HE does a maximum of 1800 with a 5% fire chance. The AP shells do a maximum of 2100. Here you can see getting caught by the radar minnow. And I suppose that leads me into a segue about one of the good things about this ship. The maneuverability isn't so bad. We've got a top speed of 38 knots, not exactly breaking any records, but we do have the engine boost that can get us a little bit over 40 knots. The turning circle is 620 meters, which is fairly small, and the rudder shift is 3.9 seconds, so I feel like the thing is pretty agile, and if you have to run away because you've been radared by a Minotaur, say, and he's shooting at you, you can wiggle and jiggle your way out of danger, like you can in most of the American DDs. It's nice and maneuverable in that sense. The torpedoes, though, are somewhat questionable. We already know that this thing gives up one of the 5 Fletcher guns, which does reduce its DPM by some amount, but for inexplicable reasons, it also gives up a torpedo tube. We've got 1 torpedo tube on this thing. It's a quintuple or 5 torpedo launcher. They have a range of 10.5 kilometers. And with this build, they go at 70 knots in the water, so they're a bit more pan-European than American. Although at the same time, with this Stig build, when they hit, the maximum damage is nearly 20,000, 19,547 to be exact, and the detectability by sea for the torpedoes is 1.4 kilometers. As for the reload time, I can tell you it is a 60-second base reload, which is quite quick. But with the Stig build and the skills that buff the torpedo reload, we have an astounding 39-second reload on these torpedoes, which is just about 9 seconds longer than the typical battleship main gun reload. That's very fast. We can be putting torpedoes in the water essentially whenever we want. We have yet to hit any, even though several minutes have elapsed in this match, but don't worry, we will land a couple before it's all over, and when they do hit, they do respectable damage. They're not quite like the rest of the pan-European destroyers, which are really fast, or torpedoes rather. They have really fast torpedoes on the rest of the pan-Europeans, but they don't hit particularly hard when they make contact. That's not true of the Velos torpedoes. They are fast, and they do hit quite hard. Not quite as hard as, of course, the IJN ones might, but as hard as, I suppose, French torpedoes. So it's not bad, it's just that you don't have too many of them. You can probably do silly things, though, with a 39-second reload in the right circumstances, but of course landing torpedoes is a lot less reliable than landing main battery shell hits, because the torpedoes have to travel in a straight line for a certain distance. There's a lot of time from when they leave the tubes to when they get close enough to hit the target. And in that amount of time, the target can change direction, slow down, speed up, avoid the torpedoes, so... And especially when you only have 1 launcher of 5, you can't really get a good spread or anything like that. You just have to sort of rely on your aim and the enemy not changing direction. This torpedo launch here against the enemy Yamato, as we enter the Bravo cap for the 2nd time this match to retake it, this is going to be the first thing we do in this battle that deals any damage whatsoever, and that is coming with only 6 minutes left on the clock. I don't know if that says something more about how I played the ship, or if it says what I think it says, which is that the ship just has a very limited tool set and is not perhaps the best at dealing a bunch of damage. We're shooting at the Yamato to try to get him to turn and get all of his guns on target. He only shoots us with the front couple, and he does tag us with 1 shell. He doesn't turn fully like I had wanted, but the torpedoes are going to make contact, and you can see there, they do some pretty good damage. I think that was 36,000 damage against the Yamato. There's a flood, and I think a fire going from our main battery guns. We did take a terrible hit from across the map. I think that might have been the Venezia that was hanging around the cap earlier. The rest of the stats, though, are the AA and concealment. The AA, according to the stats page, has an aggregate rating of 52, And of course, it does have the defensive AA consumable. The rest of the consumables are nothing unconventional. We've got a regular speed boost here that gives an 8% speed buff. But we do have the American smoke screens, and we got 3 charges of them. The consumable duration on these smoke screens is 30 seconds, so they drop for a very long time. You could make a gigantic smoke cloud with this thing if you wanted to. You can see, as we sit in the smoke now, just how long it's running. I mean, it's still going, so if we want to go forward, we can get a lot more puffs out of this. And the duration on the smoke screen after it's been laid is 127 seconds, so just over 2 minutes. It's definitely one of those smokes you can sit in for a long time and just farm things. But of course, that does come with one downside, which is if you put the smoke in the wrong place on the map, well, then it's going to be a while before you can get it back up and running. And it does feel kind of painful if you can't sit inside of the smoke screen for most of the 2 minutes that it's sitting there. So, got to be careful about where you lay it, but at least you get 3 charges with this build. And then the concealment is nothing too crazy. It's 5.4 kilometers by sea. I don't think I'm using any concealment inspiration. Oh no, I am on the Stig. That is with Eric Bai as one inspiration, and with the Look at Me Now skill active. So that's about as fully built into concealment as I really want to go. The other inspiration on the commander is, of course, William Sims. So I don't think the Velos is bad, per se. I just think there are better ships out there. I think you could take this vessel and put it down at tier 7, and nobody would bat an eye. It would perform just as well there as it does at tier 8. It seems a little bit on the weaker side for this tier, when we do have, to be fair, pretty excellent destroyers at tier 8. At least some of them are. Not all of them, but we have some real gems on the tech tree, including things like the Smollend, of course, which is a fantastic DD, the Delny, the Schultz, the Kitakazi, the Sumner. All of these tech tree tier 8 destroyers, I think, are much better than Velos, and you can get them for free. I think the only real justification for purchasing the Admiralty backing in this particular campaign is to get the drachmas for other more interesting ships in the store. It's not going to be this thing. This is just a plain Greek yogurt type destroyer, very vanilla. It doesn't have even all the advantages of the Fletcher at tier 7. It gives up 1 gun, and it gives up a rack of torpedoes for what reason? I really don't know. It's got that DFAA consumable, but the AA numbers are so unimpressive that I think the DFAA consumable just makes it so the AA actually does something. This is not like the Friesland, for example. I think the pan-European destroyers are kind of known for their AA firepower, but that's not the case here, and I don't know why. I don't know what the justification is for taking away 1 gun or for giving it only 1 torpedo tube. I thought perhaps the justification was it has better AA power, but that doesn't even seem to be the case. So I don't know what to tell you there. All I know is that I don't really recommend the ship. This is a very skippable campaign. It's not that you can't do well with it, it's just that there are much better ships to play. And, well, in this match, we've finished here with 96,830 damage. We do have 2 solo caps to our name, so that should net us some good XP. There's still 2 enemy ships left alive. I don't think either of them are going to sink in this last 60 seconds. In fact, I think they may end up taking out one of our friendlies, but it shouldn't matter. We're far enough ahead on points that even if one of our teammates sinks, we should be good enough to finish the game with a victory. We did not actually carry the game either. That is the friendly Shimakaze there that we saw for a moment, who's got almost no HP left. He's going to be above us on the leaderboard with a very impressive amount of XP. Not to say we didn't do anything useful for our team. We did deal some significant damage to the enemy Yamato with our torpedoes, and we did take the center cap twice. So both useful things for our team in terms of winning. And certainly, if you stick to the basics of sound destroyer play, you can have success with this thing. If you build it for guns, it's even fairly effective at dealing with other enemy destroyers, but it's missing a gun compared to most of the American destroyers you'd be used to, so it's not going to be the most efficacious gunboat out there. And frankly, I don't really know how the optimal way to play it is, either building for guns or building for torps. I think you could really go either way depending on your mood, but I doubt either one is going to transform the destroyer into something that's actually super strong, because it just simply isn't. It's a plain vanilla Greek yogurt kind of destroyer, and unfortunately, I don't really recommend it. But I'd say buy the Admiralty backing anyway, just to get the drachmas, if you're after other, more interesting ships, and we'll cover those moving forward. Hope you enjoyed the video. If so, give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.